Hi, this is the Valley View, and this is your host, Ken Adams. And this week we'll be interviewing Paul Evans, who's a candidate for the House District 20 here in the state of Oregon. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you.
And maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what you feel are your qualifications.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for letting me be on the show.
Oh,
It's
no
a great opportunity. House District 20, so we were talking about the same thing. House District 20 is West Salem, parts of South Salem, Monmouth, and Independence. And to answer your question about what I believe has helped make me qualified for this position, or hopefully best qualified for this position, is really three things. First has to do with service. Second is leadership and experience. And over the past 25 years, I've served in a number of different capacities as a city councilor, as a school board member, as a mayor for the city of Monmouth, as a senior policy advisor for Governor Kulongoski from 2008 to 2011. And also, in between those years and around those years, as an active duty and Air National Guard officer. I retired this past May. So 20 years of military service in and around the United States as well as overseas, public service as an elected official, and also in policy, in addition to a career of teaching. And I think that those things wrapped together have provided me an opportunity to understand how government works in Oregon and to contribute.
So you have a experience in government, which I think is always a big plus, to kind of know how things work, because I've seen people get into office and there's a kind of sometimes a fairly steep learning curve if they have very little experience.
Right.
And so I guess I should start off by asking, what do you feel are the most important issues?
Well, you know, I think there are many top-tier issues, so that everybody that's listening knows that I'm aware of the many different issues. That said, I think that there are some that are really driving the train for others. I think the first has to do with job creation and workforce development. Our country is in a situation where we have had a largely jobless recovery. The 60% of the jobs that have been made in the last 5 years during the recovery are not at the same wages they were before. So we have people having jobs, but they're not the same caliber, same quality jobs we used to have, and it's harder to raise families now. More people are on public assistance than ever before. And we have to really reset the deck. So when it comes to job creation and workforce development for those jobs, that's really my first priority. Yeah,
because it seems like not just this kind of recession that happened in 2007, 2008, but a lot of the recent recessions seems to have shed jobs afterwards that we don't really recover. And part of that is not a state policy, it's more like jobs going overseas.
That's right.
And that is, to me, a serious issue, but that's not at the state level. So what kind of job development ideas do you have, how that we can develop good paying jobs here in Oregon?
Well, I want to say I absolutely agree with your assessment. The problem is it is a federally made problem, but we have to pick up the pieces.
That's right.
And what I hope to do is really help facilitate, because no one legislator can do everything, but I hope to facilitate the big brain people that have the ideas and the worker bees that know how to make things work and bring them together and really do 3 or 4 things. The first is to find ways that we can help small businesses in Oregon that are already here compete everywhere. That means making sure that they have access to capital. That means they have access to workers that are trained and healthy. That means that they have access to infrastructure to make sure that their markets can compete. A lot of people don't know this, but Oregon is one of the top manufacturing states in the nation because we have so many small businesses that are manufacturers. I want to keep that.
Right.
The second piece of how we can really, I think, prepare ourselves for competition in the 21st century is rethinking how we train workers for the workplace. I want to introduce something very similar to what you've heard about in Congress, which I think is a little bit harder in some ways to manage than what we can do at the state. You've heard the Pay It Forward program, where college students can basically get opportunity early and then pay it off at a different rate over time. My strategy is what I call Social Security in reverse, but for Oregon, meaning that it doesn't matter college age or not. From the time you graduate high school or complete a GED till the time you retire, through bonds and other funds made available, I want to make sure that we have people able to go into and out of workforce training their entire careers and put it basically on the same methodology of paying a percentage of gross income over time, as opposed to a set amount, which is in many cases that $60,000 debt hanging over their head.
Well, I should mention that my son graduated from law school with $100,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was lucky because he got a job that did pay him nice bonuses and like that, and he's taken care of that
Right.
for the most part. But I mean, to me, it's got to be really scary for a student to come out of a four-year
Absolutely.
college being, say, $25,000, $30,000 in debt and not be able to find a job. And
Right.
you can't get rid of those student loans.
And it used to make sense to some degree because the idea was, well, once you went and got your professional training, that's pretty much it. There'd be some continuity training over time, continuing ed, but that would pretty much be it. Now we know we're in the 21st century. It's very common that people are going to have 4 or 5 different careers, not just jobs, but different careers over the course of their working lifetime. And instead of trying to do Federal Trade Act and other types of things that are tied to the specific jobs that are lost, let's rethink the puzzle and say we know we have to have a flexible workforce training system. So let's actually make it available up front for every Oregonian. They can pay it back over time because, again, trained workers are going to be more productive, able to produce more, manufacture more money coming into the economy. And say, look, from the time that you are going to the workforce to the time you hang it up, we know you're going to need skills. We know that the world's going to change even quicker. Every year it's getting quicker and quicker. So let's actually have a 21st century model for funding education as opposed to that system that was designed really around the idea that whatever it is, if it's an educated job, professional job, you'd get prepared, you'd train, and then that would be it.
Right.
It's never going to be it again. I think we're going to continually have to have those skills and those training opportunities.
And that might be something that the community colleges would
Right.
help deliver.
Absolutely.
And it would probably require a little bit of more flexibility in what they do now,
Right.
as far as being able to shift kind of classes and
Right.
help train people. And the other thing, I guess, I wasn't really good at wood shop and metal shop and all those things,
Right.
but it seems like those are some of the things that have gone away
Right.
in education, where those jobs that people would get, say, from metal work or woodwork, stay here,
Right.
if nothing else. And I think sometimes not everybody's going to go to college. And we need to make sure that we have people trained to do those jobs. And, sometimes kids change their mind.
That's right.
As they get older, they think, well, I can do this, but I think I could do more. And then, like you're saying, have the ability to
Right.
get some more training to maybe improve their skills and maybe get better jobs.
That's absolutely right. First Truth in Advertising, I'm a full-time teacher at Chemeketa, so I'm all about the community college. Second, you highlighted really 2 threads that I'd like to bring together. First is when it comes to vocational ed. When I was growing up, we had woodshop, we had FFA,
Right.
we had a lot of those things. When I was growing up, you didn't have to pay money to play in sports. We have, in many ways, changed the way we educate kids. And one of the things to that issue, before we get to the job training piece, for the K-12 system, I'm aware of, and I've been trying to follow as best I can, the governor and the legislature's recent reforms. I think that some of those are the greatest ideas in the world. That said, I think, because I used to be a school board member, I like to look at what we called about 10 years ago the quality education model. I think we have to look back and find a way to communicate to the voters in a way that makes sense so people know not just what are the aspirational outcomes, not just what the problems, but the QEM basically says for an elementary school, you have this many teachers, this much playtime, this many, this many. And in the military, and again, I don't think the military is the answer for most things. And in fact, I'm very happy I'm retired. I'm proud of my service. But the deal is that if I'm looking at the TO&E, which is Table of Operation and Equipment for an infantry unit, I know how many folks are going to be in the unit. I know how many rifles, how many trucks, how many everything. So what I propose is something called QEM Plus, where we fully fund the quality education model based on the schools, that the formula that was created, plus 3%, and that 3% is designed, the communities would decide what to do with the 3% so that they can play to ag if they're an agricultural community. They can
Right.
play to metal shops if they are in an industrial area. They can play to fisheries if fisheries and hatcheries are part of their economy. Because what those school classes used to do is not just teach them skills, but it kept a lot of those at-risk folks in the school system.
Right.
We're spending a lot of money right now reinventing the wheel in terms of at-risk programming when growing up, a lot of the folks that would be using the at-risk programs in today's world, we were able to keep them in school because we had a shop teacher that would stay after and work with them, would teach them different skills, would bring them in.
Yeah, kids change. And the other part of that is that a lot of times what I think is a problem is that when you focus on, like, say, math and English and things like that, there's lots of other things like music or art that kids get interested in. And once you get them interested in one subject, it tends to spread, you know, and it gives them a reason to come to school. And I think that's why it's been really short-sighted to cut out music programs and the shop classes and things like that, because you need to get kids excited about learning. And like, I can remember when I was a kid, my dad showed me how to do batting averages. Well, it made math really exciting because now I had a way to apply it.
That's right.
And the same thing could be said for lots of other subjects that we consider, well, they're not, you know, rigorous or whatever. But the thing is they get kids on that path.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of what's been missing over the, at least since I went to school, what I've seen.
And that's absolutely the case. In Oregon, I'm a product of the public schools in Oregon, and I tease about the math, and actually I had great math teachers. I just am not very smart at math. But in the humanities, in civics, which is something that I'd like to talk about in a minute, I took agriculture, I took music, I was in sports, and all of those things helped feed interest about other things. And it's an ironic thing to me that when George Bush, President George Bush, the son, committed us to the No Child Left Behind, he was basically arguing that, well, China and a lot of the other countries around the world have better performance, better outcomes of their students. And in many ways, if you look at a standardized test, they're right. And yet, the Chinese and most other countries in the world would give their eye teeth to have American school systems because we teach innovation, creativity, and free thinking, which we've actually, over the last 10 years, largely forfeited to try to emulate them.
Right.
What we need to get back to is recognizing that, yes, we have to be accountable, we have to be responsible, and I think it's important that we come to fruition in terms of a grade sheet that we can grade our school's performances on. That said, I don't accept the core curriculum as the only core curriculum.
Right.
I think it has to get back into literature, it has to get back into dance, it has to get into PE, it has to get into all those things that, like you said, get students interested and involved. And then the second thing, post-high school, and this is the jobs piece, I want every community that's possible, and I'm willing to help fight for funds to do this. We have libraries because in the past people didn't have access to books. Well, now with the internet, they have access. I want an innovation center in every community that is literally the tools and volunteers so that anybody that has an idea, that they can no longer keep their idea in their garage, but they need a place to do it and the understanding of how to use the skills to make it work. Do we actually create an environment of innovation in the state of Oregon, and we reward that by, for startup ideas, provide the first 2 or 3 years in subsidized form so that we can actually bring ideas and feed this manufacturing process from a small business perspective. So we not only have folks that are interested and engaged K-12, but for those folks that are just inventors and want to have that opportunity.
Well, they have a support system.
They have a support system, which right now we don't do unless it's online, which is good. But in many ways, we have so many folks that have so many good ideas and talents, but there's no place for them to actually work on it, except perhaps the community colleges, and they're limited by space, time, and money. So I think that's one of the directions we need to go in.
Yeah, one of the things you talked about was capital for these small businesses. Now, how would you generate that? You would have to set aside some money in the budget, which is then probably going to be attacked periodically when budgets are short.
Absolutely, and to me, this is one of the areas where public-private partnerships are very helpful, and I'll give you a real-world example. Actually, Chemeketa has a facility downtown Salem that's very good at bringing mentors, folks that have been business people, they've been inventors, they've taken things to market. They actually have a relationship with some of the local banks, and what they do is for folks that are interested in starting up a company or have a new innovative product, they actually wrap their arms around them and help them through this process. Not one company that's actually used that particular program through Chemeketa has failed. So now, it hasn't had that many because there hasn't been a lot of money. But what the local banks are interested in doing is they're willing to take risks, but they have to make sure that the people know what they're doing. So what I'd like to do is basically have a statewide conversation and help facilitate this with folks that are in the Angel Network, the folks that are in those types of programs that are venture capitalists but have a patriotic perspective and want to invest here. And then make sure that they have comfort in real people that have done it before, so it's not just someone with a new idea that doesn't have the ability to actually make a profit long term. but to bring these sources together, not just by happenstance, but literally in every community across the state. And then the sweetener is I've seen public-private situations where small communities have been able to have a little bit of money put aside through their enterprise funds, like water, sewer, electrical. Monmouth, we own our own electric utility.
Well, that's a bonus.
It's a bonus. And because the idea is if you are using it to bring in more electric use, it's an expense that can be understood to be an enterprise expense. So theoretically, the idea would basically be put a little bit of money with the community, public money, that could be leveraged with the local banks, that could be leveraged with individual investment. And I think you can actually have a formula statewide that could work.
Well, that sounds very promising. So I'll wish you a lot of luck.
I hope so.
But yeah, I mean, so that kind of creates stimulus, and also,
That's right.
you know, like a lot of times, I think people when they see how it can work, then it makes them easier. Well, I can do that.
That's right.
And that's half the battle. And sometimes when you don't have anybody mentoring you or kind of showing you how to do certain parts maybe you're not familiar with, it seems rather daunting, and sometimes it leads to people just kind of giving up. Well, we won't be able to do that. And my wife started her own business about 20 years ago, and people helped her out.
That's right.
You know, and would say, well, you need to go here to get this, you know, and like that. And so I can see how that works. You know, you have a support system for people who are trying to start up a business or have an idea about a new system for manufacturing or whatever. So that's good that you have two really solid things that kind of interlock as far as development and like that. But there are some other issues around the state. And I've got to tell you that the big one that I've seen is Cover Oregon.
Yeah.
And it has been, and my wife, you know, since she has her own business, has been trying to get set up in Cover Oregon since October. And they called her today, and it's still a mess. And it's very frustrating.
This is one of those issues where I have some strong opinions, but I wasn't in the middle of the fight, so I'm going to temper my opinions.
Yes.
Because again, nothing is so simple as when you're not actually involved.
Yeah.
I have a natural, fundamental belief in what we call the single-payer system, and I say that because I'm a product of the military, and I actually am a patient in the veterans system, which are both single-payer systems.
Well, actually, the veteran system is a socialist system because you have to go exactly to their doctors and their facilities.
But they actually have something called fee-basis systems, to where you can actually go out and go on the market if it's necessary. So the thing is, I'm not afraid of labels that some people want to attach to systems. That said, I know, I've known Governor Kitzhaber for some time. I know he understands the health system probably better than most other chief executive, at least at the state level. And I know Bruce Goldberg, and I know a lot of the players involved. What I'm looking forward to helping support come January of 2015, when most of this is hopefully sorted out, is a little more rigorous approach to oversight in terms of contracted services, is a little more oversight in terms of ensuring that agencies are working and playing well together. And I think that in this particular case, and again, I wasn't directly involved, but it sounds like there were some opportunities missed as things move forward. And to me, I've been frustrated by the whole political framing of healthcare for some time, because ultimately, it is not that people aren't going to get healthcare. They are. The question is how we manage costs to make sure that we get people preventative health care versus the higher cost crisis health care. And more importantly, quite frankly, from an economic perspective, how do we build the most educated, most healthy workforce in human history? Because healthy people that are doing things they want to do produce more and have less off time than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to respond to that particular question other than saying I'm hoping for the best. And come January 2015, I plan on helping push a little more oversight on some of those contractor type issues that I think there's lots and lots of areas for improvement on.
Yeah, well, I can give you a little bit of my experience because I worked for Delta Dental, and we had a contract with the state of California. And before we put things into production, they had rigorous testing that we had to do before it went in. And see, I worked on what they call the commercial side, and you would get programmers saying, oh, it'll be fine. and they'd get their boss to sign off on something, and then it wouldn't be fine.
Right.
But the state of California did have rigorous testing going on. You can set things up. Now, one of the problems that I see, and Oracle's probably kind of an example of this, is that we used to use mainframes, which really had a lot of control over the system that
Right.
you were using. Now we've got this mid-platform kind of stuff where you're using
Cloud technology.
Yeah, right. Or you're using Microsoft products,
Right.
and now you're opening yourself up to all sorts of other problems that are hard to test, frankly.
Right.
And so that's been my experience, because I've worked in that business for almost 40 years, and I know what programs will tell you, and I know what they actually deliver. And that is something that I think you're right. You're going to, especially with technology, you're going to have some testing and firm testing that they have to meet before you install anything. And there's serious penalties if they can't do it on time.
Right. I mean, that's the great, not on the state level, but on the federal level.
Right.
One of the ironies about the Obamacare rollout that I still am awestruck by is how it's the federal government's fault that 4 private contractors weren't able to actually deliver product on time. But it's the federal government's public fault, even though these private entities, theoretically, the private sector is supposed to do things efficiently. So and the point is, it's so complex that if
Yeah.
we would actually stop, at least at the federal level, stop pointing fingers and say, all right, here's where we're at. How do we make sure that we get what we need to get done? And once it's done, then we can go find people accountable for what happened. And I think sometimes I think the news and media benefit from the fight, and they want more sizzle rather than focusing on the steak.
Right. And what do we need to do to fix it?
Right.
But as an example of what you're talking about a year ago, I signed up for Medicare, and before a month was over, I had my card and all sorts of information, and they send me booklets and all sorts of
Yeah.
information. And that is an example of a government function.
3% waste is the last figure I saw.
Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, why we didn't just make everybody into Medicare is.
Well, yeah, because they're still not going to cover everybody under this current system that they have, and I think it would have been better just to expect. But that's our view. I think we're pretty much in agreement on that. So the other issues that I hear people talking about
Sure.
are the bridge, the Columbia Bridge. They think that
CRC.
Yeah, it's like an aggravation because Washington State's not going along, but also there's a lot of talk here in the community about the third bridge over the Willamette over
Right.
the West Salem. And the other one that this probably is, well, it might be kind of a state issue too, is the bridge over to Minnow Brown. Actually, that really freaks people out because it's a lot of money for just, pedestrians and bicyclists.
Right.
So how do you kind of keep these things in line? And do you have any particular viewpoint on what's going on with these bridges? And infrastructure kind of in general? Because you mentioned about
Right.
having good, solid infrastructure to help Oregon
Right.
small businesses.
I'm a big believer in big public works projects. That said, I'm less a believer in contracted private firms doing the work than I am in the WPA or PWA style program where we're actually teaching kids or teaching folks that need skills or making sure that it's integrating training process with outcomes. So I'll just up front, I'm still an idealist when it comes to that. When it comes to Minto Brown thing, as long as we can actually have a shared, and I think we're actually close to having that, a shared understanding of the environmental impact and how this is seen as a good thing for the community, for people to become more aware of nature and to enjoy it in the least impactful way, I'm for it. The third bridge over the Willamette, that's a really touchstone issue because I don't have an answer because every time I think I understand where they're going to propose it and what they're going to do, it changes. So what I believe is this. I believe two things. One, wherever you build a bridge, traffic patterns will adjust and it will have unanticipated consequences. Number two, I'm a believer in actually, and this is what we did in Monmouth, you can either continue to build more and more bridges, which are expensive and often
Right.
have unanticipated consequences. You can get into the light rail business, which I love, but Oregonians are never going to probably fund, especially down here at least. Some of the things I'd like to work in the legislature is mixed-use development, infrastructure changes, and infrastructure not just bridges, But in Monmouth, we put a fiber optic network in there. It was 100 times the size we needed, with the idea that we could actually create a cyber cottage, cyber village, so that people could actually develop their businesses there and not have to be on the road to Portland or Salem as often. Now, having said that, if we can find consensus on where the bridge across the Willamette should be and keep West Salem's identity that's growing, I mean, a lot of work's going on in West Salem right now. You know, I'm not opposed to that idea. I just want to make sure that we don't end up with trucking routes where we don't want trucking routes and have a worse nightmare in terms of planning. The CRC, however, is the most intriguing one of all. I still believe that that is more of a federal issue than the feds want to admit. And the reason we have a federal government is because you end up with states having fights like we're having between, are we going to toll it, but only going to toll them? How are we going to do this? So what I would like to see is, I'd like to see, quite frankly, the two governors, our congressional delegation, and some folks from the White House figure out, all right, 3 years from now, if we're going to have another bridge, how's it going to be done? Feds kick in a third, and both states kick in a third. This half and half thing can't happen as long as Washington's not going to play.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like your idea about not having people move around, and because like the other thing that occurs to me is that the era of cheap energy is coming to an end.
It is.
And so we need to think in terms of where we need to be in 20, 30, 40 years, and not just what's going on right now. So we kind of need to wrap up. So is there anything that you'd like to, say at this point that, we've got a few seconds left. So.
Sure. Bottom line is, I don't profess to have all the answers. I'm still learning all the questions, and I'm not even sure I'm ever going to get there. But I believe that government matters, and I think government can be a partner. It's not the solution, nor is it the problem to every problem, but it is, I think, a facilitator. And I'm running, and I believe I have the skills necessary to be a facilitator, much like Vicki Berger was, and she's retiring now. I'd like to take her place and be the facilitator for this district, to be able to bring people together, convene meetings, convene discussions, and help us find the right solution. It may not always be the fastest, but at least the right solution for moving forward.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate you coming on. And come back next week for Valley View.